We now turn to item 7, the meat of any diocesan synod, which is the introduction, consideration and adoption of the report of the Diocesan Council, which has a few consequent motions attached to it. We'll come back to the motions at the end of the presentation and, if necessary, discussion of the report, but it will be proposed by the Reverend David White, the Rector of Carlow, seconded by Ms. Margaret Jacob of Killarn Union. So I hope that the proposer's video is to hand, and we'll watch that now.
I would like to propose the report of Diocesan Council for adoption by Synod. So much has happened since we met last year, and I will be only touching on a few areas of the Book of Reports. And in all that I share, I wonder if it would be helpful to think a little bit about how we understand and, more importantly, experience the slow work of God. Diocesan Synod each year is an opportunity to gather as a diocesan community in order to reflect on the past 12 months and also to look to the immediate future. This year, as we meet in a very different way, we have much to ponder, as the entire world has been turned upside down by the tiniest of viruses. There has been much written about COVID-19 in the magazine, so I would not want to repeat any of that now. As people of faith, I like to think that we are invited to have gratitude for the past, to be passionate for the present and hopeful for the future. But all this requires a living and active relationship with God. One standout moment in the recent past has been the release of the magnificent documentary David Attenborough, A Life on Our Planet. You may have seen it. After writing these few words, I was delighted to see the Reverend Trevor Sargent referring to it in his column in November's Diocesan magazine, which I recommend to you. The movie opens with the 93-year-old walking through some deserted buildings. It's near the Chernobyl nuclear plant in the Ukraine, a once buzzing area that was evacuated after human error rendered it uninhabitable in 1986. This disaster was the result of, as he points out, bad planning and human error. Attenborough then goes on to trace his career as a naturalist spanning many decades, mapping how steeply the planet's biodiversity has degenerated before him. He recounts his life and the evolutionary history of life on Earth. He grieves the loss of wild places before he offers a vision for the future. The facts are stark. The natural world is failing. Human beings have chosen to use their intelligence to replace the wild with the tame. The challenge is to act now and put it right. We cannot continue to do what we are doing in the way that we are doing it. In other words, how we are living our lives is unsustainable. The invitation is to work with nature and not against it, to not only use our intelligence but also our wisdom, so that working together we can continue to hope that life will continue to thrive on Earth. And it is not all doom and gloom. Just remember that the lockdown earlier in the summer was not all experienced by every species equally. There was much to be optimistic about, for example, in the stories about the waters of the Venice canals, with reports saying that there was not just a clear view of the sandy bed, but shoals of fish scuttling crabs and multicoloured plant life. The clarity of the water had improved dramatically. Cormorants had even returned to dive for fish. But like all change, the causes were more complex than first thought. The apparent cleanliness of the water was not in fact due to a lack of pollution, said one local environmental researcher. The reason was the absence of motorised transport, which normally churns up the muddy canal floor. It wasn't that nature just returned. Our behaviour and choices effected change and brought about more life. One local man said, "I honestly believe we should take the opportunity of this lockdown to reflect and see how we can be more organised in the future to find a balance between the city and tourism." and balance and belief in a bright future is the invitation to us as people of faith in this diocese. We must use both our intelligence and wisdom to discern what God is asking of us. It would be easy to hark back to how we remember things were in the past, even in the recent past. And yes, some things were easier, and perhaps even better in the past. But that is not the whole story. For if we are held captive by the past, we can have no hope for the future. And in all that we do, we must always be a people about the slow work of God. With this in mind, the Diocesan Review Commission was set up on the 29th of June 2019. As the report supplied by Dorcas Collier-Hannon makes clear, their remit is to consider what are the areas of success and are the areas of concern in the life of our diocese, what issues are being prioritised and what is being overlooked, what is promoting true Christian fellowship and what might be causing disquiet. In preparation to facilitate the work, the Review Commission members have undertaken relevant training. A comprehensive questionnaire has been sent to all serving clergy in the diocese. This was followed with a questionnaire for all retired diocesan clergy. Careful analysis of the completed questionnaires has afforded the Commission valuable insights, with the next step being to undertake face-to-face meetings in parishes when this is possible. Strategic is a word which has crept into our collective diocesan vocabulary and has become associated with the work of the Diocesan Review Commission. But we can't but notice that the term strategic is being used in a variety of ways, which has the potential to be problematic later on. Strategic doesn't mean the same as planning. Strategic is about being open to the working of the Spirit. It encourages us to think about responding to the slow work of God rather than simply frenetically reacting to what's happening. Planning is a lot easier to do. We make lists and tick boxes. It feels a lot easier because it's safe and even programmatic. But planning is not about what we choose not to do and why. It has nothing to do with principles or guiding values. Planning doesn't challenge or question long-held assumptions and hardly ever challenges the status quo. Mistaking planning for strategy is a dangerous trap we must try to avoid. When we think of being strategic for the future, it's bound to be scary because it forces us to confront a future we can only guess at. At the moment, thinking about tomorrow seems impossible, never mind the next few years. We might also worry that if we make a strategy too tight, it might cut off possibilities and options. We fear that we will be bound to a restrictive map of how things will develop for us. There's also the temptation to make the strategy so comprehensive and glossy that it feels less scary. It's less scary, of course, because it has no basis in reality. It has become a head exercise and will have earned its place on the dusty bookshelf. Fear and discomfort are an essential part of strategy making if we're taking it seriously. But it does mean some kind of commitment to outcomes and goals that can be measured. However, it's not about making a strategy so concrete that there's no room for the Holy Spirit. If we're too completely comfortable with any strategy for the future, it won't be long before complacency and sloth will set in. The members of the Commission, Eric Driver, Gillian Purser, Tom Gordon, Linda Rainsbury, Phyllis Grothier, Ian Cruikshank and Dorcas Collier, recognise that "but we always did it this way" is a motto with limitations, and they are worthy of our prayerful solidarity as they go about the slow work of God. This past year has seen the first ordinations to what has been called ordained local ministry. Janet Finlay was ordained priest and will continue to serve in the Portlaoise and Ballyfin Union of Parishes. Pat Coleman has been ordained deacon, and Ger James and Mike O'Mara will be ordained when circumstances permit. There is much to be joyful about, and yet we must recognise that this new model of ministry reflects the changes in our diocese and wider church. The words of Bishop Patrick Rook continue to ring true. Commenting on the OLM ministry, he said, "Fewer people are coming to church, fewer people are signing up as members of the church, fewer people are paying into church, and fewer people are offering for full-time ministry in the church. Consequently, in both rural and urban parishes, north and south, traditional models are creaking and in some places are unsustainable and inadequate. There is less money, less people power, less expertise. It won't be long, in the rural areas at least, until the majority of the clergy are likely to be volunteers. Hence the need for a cost-neutral, sensitive ministry to work with and alongside the traditional model." He closes with, "Yes, the purists will say that OLM is about vocation, not about filling gaps, and of course they are correct. But to deny that it has nothing to do with filling gaps is, in our context, disingenuous at best and dishonest at worst." The slow work of God requires that we are ruthlessly honest, have enormous patience, and believe that our God is with us. The ways of God sometimes require endings, and endings bring with them a degree of sadness. Bishop, as you have said in the Book of Reports, for decades in Kilkenny, Denise and the office have been synonymous. She has survived 6 bishops, which in itself is extraordinary, and over the coming months she will guide her successor, Elizabeth Keys, as she finds her feet. We wish Denise every blessing in her retirement. However, I'm not sure whether people like Denise ever really fully retire. So as I close, I would like us to be reminded that the future isn't something that happens to us. We create it. But we create it best when we cooperate with God. Attenborough puts great emphasis on human effort and solidarity. He stresses the value of human intelligence and, above all, wisdom. However, as Christians, we can never neglect the centrality of God in all that we are and in all that we do. And as we look to the future, we must acknowledge the equal numbers of opportunities and challenges which we will need to embrace and to face. And we must never neglect bringing them all to God in our prayer. All lives, including the life of faith, involve tensions in varying ways, such as the gap between the real and the ideal, between stability and change, between knowing what to do and feeling a bit at sea. Despite our closeness to God, these tensions do not disappear. So the goal is not to get rid of them, but to be able to live with them in a realistic and honest way, so that we can make good decisions in the light of them. We know that God can work in mysterious ways beyond our imagining, but in much of what happens, we are invited to cooperate in the slow process of change. In other words, the slow work of God. So while we might like instant solutions or shortcuts or the perfect resolution, they do not tend to be readily available. Reflecting on our past sets us free to live in the way the Lord desires for us, so that in the present we can make better choices with greater freedom and indeed joy. And in all that we do, we might remember the words of a wise saint: above all, trust in the slow work of God. Bishop, I would like to propose the report of Diocesan Council for adoption by this Synod.
Can we now move on to the seconder, Mrs. Jacob, please?
Thank you, Bishop. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Bishop Michael and fellow Synod members, thank you first of all, Reverend White, for a very comprehensive report on the work of the Diocesan Council throughout the year. In seconding the report of the Diocesan Council Synod, I cannot but pay tribute to Nace Hughes and her work in the diocese. We have all greatly appreciated the time, energy and commitment Denise has put into her role as Diocesan Secretary down through the years. One only has to read your copy of the annual Diocesan Book of Reports, many of which have been prepared by Denise, to realise the professionalism with which she undertakes all aspects of her work. She has been the real go-to person when it comes to looking for advice, information, and help with matters to do with church governance. Denise's patience and understanding with queries, either by phone, email, or in person, has made her so very approachable for everyone. Her involvement in the diocese went far beyond her work in the office, attending many different committee meetings, setting agendas, taking minutes, and ensuring that all ran smoothly. Another daunting task that Denise embarked on every year was helping with the Bishop's Poster competition, sorting through entries, ensuring that all was in order for those tasked with judging the competition. When attending Synod, one of the first to greet you has always been Denise, ensuring that everyone collected their badge, signed in, and of course, ordered their lunch, all done with a smile and in good humour. Synod ran smoothly because of the meticulous preparation spearheaded by her. As we say au revoir to Denise in her role as Diocesan Secretary, we wish her every blessing and good health in the next phase of her life. Thank you, Denise, for your kindness, generosity of time, and friendship to us all throughout the years. You will be greatly missed in the diocesan office by everyone in the diocese and beyond. And we wish Elizabeth Keys every good luck as she takes over in your position. Bishop, I would like to second the report of Diocesan Council for adoption by this Synod. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jacob. And those words indeed were well deserved and well said. Thank you. Now, what we would normally do if we were at a more normal synod is we would go through the book page by page. People would line up against the wall waiting to rush to the rostrum to make their particular point or articulate their particular view. They would magnificently hang the most wondrous of speeches on particular words they would identify in the text. To be honest, I think you'll have to live with the fact that doing that sort of thing this year is going to be difficult. And what I'm suggesting before we put the report and the accompanying motions to you is if there are perhaps 3 or 4 people who have a burning point they feel needs to be made and needs to be made now, that hasn't come up in the presenter speeches, where there is any gap in understanding or clarity. If a small number of such people would like to have the floor, they can. And I think there's a mechanism for sending in names to speak. I think to go to the, if you use the chat, it'll go to the staff. And but really, you do it if you have a burning need to make something clear. And we'll just pause for a moment and see if anything comes in.
Chat is open, there's nothing just yet.
Okay.
Bishop, while we're paused,
Go to the word chat is, maybe someone who doesn't read it.
Yes, who is that?
it's Ruth Elms.
Yes, Archdeacon, sorry, I couldn't make it out for a moment.
That's okay. Is now an appropriate time to just make a comment about the committee which I served on for the reduction of numbers for Synod?
Yes, I realised that this might come up and wondered would it come in that way. So Archdeacon Elms has served heroically on our behalf on a committee concerned with the issue of General Synod representation, which has been laborious, not least because of how the timing of it has been affected by COVID. And I'd be delighted if she said a few words for the information of the diocese on where this matter stands. And meanwhile, if anyone else wants to jump into the chat box, please do, but don't feel you have to.
So just to say, the work of the committee was obviously affected by COVID because General Synod will meet virtually next week instead of meeting in person this year. And the Standing Committee Working Group, General Synod Representation Working Group, felt that the issues with COVID also affected what we were going to bring to Synod this year. So the proposal, which was passed by Standing Committee, was that the bill will come to us or those who are representing us on General Synod in 2021. And there will be an information opportunity for those who will be new to Synod to catch up with what's been going on for the last 3 years. Most of the questions that we have been asked on this committee, and I will keep this very brief, is that how will it affect our diocese, and will it affect the voting in terms of those issues which may be controversial in our church? Will one area of our country be able to vote down another area of our country in the Church of Ireland? So just to assure you that the representation will continue to support the 2/3, 1/3 majority. So no one area of our country or no couple of dioceses in our church will be able to affect the voting in the same way that it stands at the moment. So that's the first thing. Second thing to say is, yes, we will be affected very much by the reduction in numbers of our synodical representation, but also to say that we have been overrepresented historically over the years. So we have worked out a way of fair representation based on parishes and diocesan size. So just to say that everything has been put on hold this year for General Synod, and heading for Synod next year, it will be explained much more clearly. So if anybody has any questions on that, I'm happy to answer them, but all has paused during COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Archdeacon. It was very important to be apprised of that and brought up to date, and thank you for your own work. And as you say, there will be further time in the coming triennium to enact this, but also, as you rightly say, this diocese has to face the fact it has been somewhat overrepresented, even in terms of sound proportion, because when we united, when the old Ossory, Ferns and Loughlin reunited with the old Cashel, Waterford, Lismore in the 1970s, in a sense, all the existing representation of those dioceses was then brought together. So in a way, we've had over 40 years to enjoy that transitional arrangement, and probably while remaining appropriately proportionate, it does need to be looked at. Have any names come into the chat box? No. Well, I'm going to assume that nobody wishes to take the floor from the comfort of their own fireside and exhort us on any great matter. And thank you for your indulgence through the generosity of your silence. It enables us to get the business done, to indicate your trust in the staff and the council for all they do on your behalf. And I can simply assure you, when we gather in a salubrious venue like the Dolman Hotel next year, we will have all the extra time for people to enjoy each other's oratorical gifts and to catch up on that part of the Synod, which actually I always greatly enjoy, because that is the true parliamentary part of the Synod, when we are, in the best sense, a talking shop, banging off each other's ideas and testing the atmosphere of speaking in each other's presence. And there is no way of recreating that. And we will, we hope, return to our synodical authenticity in that sense the next time round. So therefore, assuming that we can proceed, the report was introduced and proposed by Mr. White and seconded by Ms. Jacob. I'm taking it that they are content still to, by waving or something, to indicate that they wish to continue to propose its adoption. And I might mention from the chair, it might make things simpler, I hope that's all right with Mr. White, that on the first year of the triennium, if we wish the council to be in office for 3 years rather than re-elected every single year, we have to indicate that that's our intention, and that's our custom in this diocese, to allow some measure of continuity of governance and policy. And could I assure you that seeking your consent to make amendations to the diocesan rules, there is nothing insidious or sinister or crafty about this. This is simply an editorial tidying up of editorial errors that those of us who use the diocesan rules a lot, which are readily available for inspection in the office, have discovered over the years to be mistaken in the original printing. There is absolutely nothing that is non-editorial here. And there's a bit of tidying up, for example, making clear that the Board of Religious Education should be appointed triennially like all the other boards, and deleting references to the Cashel and Ossory Board of Mission and Unity, which is a board which in that, as it were, former part of the diocese no longer exists. So if Mr. White and Ms. Jacob are happy to continue to set these matters before us, we now have the full motion on the screen, and if nobody wants to speak to it, perhaps then we can have a poll.
Bishop, I propose that the report is adopted, that the council elected by the Synod holds office for 3 years, and that the non-substantial corrections outlined in the order of business be made to the diocesan rules and regulations.
Thank you, Mr. White. Seconded by Mrs. Jacob. Thank you. And would members please submit their poll? Is that all agreed?
Agreed.
How many people have we in the house, as it were, at the moment, out of interest?
151.
We've 151 people who are all apparently happy with our proceedings, and that's a very good attendance in terms of our normal doing of things. That reminds me to say, and a couple of people asked about this, normally of its nature the Synod is a public event and people are entitled to walk into the designated venue and be admitted to what's called in parliamentary language the strangers area. Again, we couldn't do that because of the numbers by this medium, but nothing we do now should compromise the principle that in normal circumstances the Synod debates in public. And therefore I think we are recording this, that has been indicated to you, and that means it will be publicly available. I would like at this point, if I may, I'd like to suspend standing orders, and if Susan Gallacher, the representative of the Methodist Church, is still tuned in and, as it were, in the house, I'd love her just in a few sentences to greet us and cheer us up in the context of a greeting from our friends of the Methodist Church. Can we refer to Susan Gallacher, please?
Hi there. Thank you for the invitation to join you today. I do bring greetings from the Southern District of the Methodist Church in Ireland and from those who live and work and witness alongside our covenant partners in the Church of Ireland in this area. None of us who started our vocational life this year have anything to compare it with. You guys all do. And so it's all just exciting and full of opportunities for us. I'm sure there's been a dip in how you've all felt this year though. But I am glad to be here, and I look forward to meeting you physically when it is safe to do so, around and about, and to partner with you in however we can do that.
Thank you so much. That was succinct and warm, and we look forward to meeting you further.